We are going to welcome Olaya Cernuda, World Triathlon Head of Media, to share her views on digital trends in international sports, OTT, and social media. Welcome. Olaya?
Welcome. Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. Welcome, everyone, and really nice, really glad to be here this morning in Europe, afternoon for you in Chinese Taipei. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and all the speakers this next couple of days. I think it's going to be amazing and really exciting to talk about what is next and what is next on the digital ecosphere and the OTT platforms or video on demand platforms when it comes to the world of sports and in particular to the world of winter sports and figure skating. So just to give a little bit of background, I am the head of media and content for one international federation, so for World Triathlon, which is the International Federation of Triathlon, of the sport of triathlon. And we also have a winter triathlon section. So we cover both summer and winter side of sports. And we are very, very much focused on how we can increase and implement new strategies to engage with new audiences, both in the digital ecosphere and in the real world, let's say. As many others, or as all sport organizations, up until a year and a half ago, we all had our plans and we all had our ways of approaching this trend and how to showcase our sport and how to help grow in our sport. But then everything changed as the world changed in, I'd say, March, April 2020, when the pandemic started hitting the whole world. And if you allow me 1 second, let me share with everyone just one quick presentation to show a little bit how we had to change everything in terms of approaching this world. And let me share the presentation. Okay, so how we change everything and approach the whole new world when it comes to digital transformation. So back then, we had a strategy that was focused mainly on helping grow in our sport by supporting live events. And a few years ago, we decided to go on what it's called in the market an OTT platform. So an OTT platform is a platform where people can watch live events. And up until then, it was basically meant just for live events. So we were just streaming our races, the triathlon races, live. And we were giving the audience the possibility of watching them either live or on demand, but just focused on events. We were not trying to do anything external or anything more than that. What changed during the pandemic is that obviously we didn't have events going on. So most of the events worldwide were canceled. But we still had consumers, had fans everywhere, and had sponsors, and had plenty of different approaches that we needed to fill in. That obviously we needed to feed them with content and feed them with things to just keep engaged with our sport and keep interacting with us. So we started producing not only live sports, which is what we usually had, but also to do what we call other products, what were possible and feasible during the pandemic. And this is where platforms like this one we're using right now for this webinar came into play. So we found out, everyone, not only we, but everyone found out that it was actually possible to do a show, kind of a TV show from home. And we didn't need the resources that we used to have. So we didn't need a setup, professional cameras, lights, sound, technicians, and everything, and a whole studio to make the shows. And we could make those studios and those shows at home. So we started building different products that could fit contacting athletes, contacting sponsors, contacting event organizers, contacting even judges, and dedicating some resources also to education, just to keep the content flow going for a while and keep people engaged and interacting with our activities. So we found, and this is one of the main things that we discovered and that we are applying moving on when we think what's next and how should we approach the upcoming seasons. But we will talk about this in a little bit. So the first key finding for us was that now the pandemic brought us some tools and brought us some experience and some know-how on how to keep going with things for the fans and for the community in an easier way, or in a way that is easier for people to not only connect, but also to participate in these shows. And this could mean athletes, could be coaches, could be people that is in different parts of the world. And we didn't have to bring everyone in one place to film and to produce the content. So it was way, way easier to get these things going. One of the key findings that we also found when we started this approach is that the main thing that people was looking for was to have direct access to the main stars of everything when it comes to sport, all kinds of sport, which basically is the athletes. So having athletes engaging and performing and not only competing, but also showing how is the life, the behind the scenes life of athletes was really a great experience for us in terms of getting people really engaged with our activities, which also meant that we had some products to give to our sponsors, and we were able to bring back to the community and get the ball still rolling and get people more engaged with our activities. We were doing this at the beginning mainly in our OTT platform and as a way, and we started discussing plenty of different activities when it comes to OTT. So the first main question that we ask ourselves, and I think this is going to be discussed later by agencies and companies that run different OTT platforms, is should we go free and open to absolutely everyone, or should we go to a more exclusive and pay model, which is the model that some companies like Netflix or like HBO or basically some TV and movie companies are experimenting, which is if you really want high quality exclusive content, you need to give us something in return. That something in return can be money and can be a subscription model, which we have for not all the content, but for part of the content. Or it can be, when we say give us something in return, it can be data so that we can have a better and more comprehensive knowledge of our audience so that we can target products more specifically oriented to the audience. Or it can be partnerships with brands that are really interested on investing in some products and to reach out to the wider community. And then it was a matter of deciding whether we wanted to just keep it in the OTT platform or we wanted to go live, public, and reach a way bigger audience, but probably less marketed or with less possibilities of marketing that audience. In our case, we went for a dual strategy, which is let's have our premium content, the one that is really expensive to produce because we're still doing live streaming in races with and triathlon is a really expensive sport in terms of resources because we're an open air sport, which means that for covering one race, We need helicopters or drones to cover the water part, the swimming part of the races. And we also need motorbikes to cover the cycling part of the races, plus also motorbikes to cover the run course. We have really large venues with lots of cameras to cover, while indoor sports, and specifically sports like figure skating or other winter sports, are basically indoor, which means that with 3-4 fixed cameras, you can cover everything that's going on, and it's way easier to cover these sports. In our case, we decided a dual strategy, which was like mixing on one side this approach of covering the costs, the TV production costs of going live with some events, and satellite costs and drones and camera operators and all the crews that we have on site, with another mix of open for absolutely everyone and engaging with larger audiences on social, which is the more specific content that is easier to produce and also easier to consume. One of our events, one of our races is usually around 2 hours long when it comes to athlete interviews, which is basically the most consumed content. We talk about 3-4 minutes, depending on the platform and the use that we're giving. So with this mixed approach, we found out that we had a large community focus on new contents that we are producing. Now, what we are doing right now, and what will be the goal for the next few months for all the sport organizations, basically, is how we actually convert. Well, first, how we keep those audiences that grew a lot during the pandemic, while we didn't have many live events going on. Now we found that the Tokyo Olympics has brought a lot of public eagerness. So the public is really eager to consume the sport and to consume products that are linked with the sport world in general, especially knowing that for the first time ever, we will have the Winter Olympics coming up in only 4 months or 5 months. That means that we keep the audience captive from this summer, so from the Summer Olympics until the next Winter Olympics. By having only 6 months in between both of them, means that we can generate lots of content to build up and to make sure that when the Winter Olympic times comes, we have an audience that is really used to consume all our products and all our events, so that we can maximize the impact that our sport has in the Olympic movement. Why is that important? Because at the end, the pinnacle of a sport is the Olympics. So we're really looking to try to have as many athletes and as many spectators or public engage with a sport, to make sure that we grow the basis. So we grow the sport from the beginning. And this is where the role of the national federations is really important, so that we make sure that all our events and all the young athletes and all the ones who are not yet competing at the Olympics level, they also have a window of opportunity in terms of showcasing the sport when it comes to events, showcasing the athletes when it comes, and we saw the welcome video with some young athletes. So it's really, really important as a national federation or as a sport event organizer to make sure that we engage with the basis of the sport, with the younger generation, with the upcoming stars, or with the young athletes that are training to reach the top. Because if we have a good relationship with them from the beginning, and we make sure that they understand how we can give them more exposure and also how we can cooperate with them in an easier world, it will be easier and easier when we will start growing. So when these kids that now are just competing at local level or national level will start competing at a higher level and will start making the highest sphere until eventually at one point they will get to the Olympics. It will be easier for us to keep to have a healthy relationship with them, and to make sure that we can cooperate in terms of generating content. Because the most important asset for one sport organization, even if it's at a national level, international level, the Olympics, wherever, is to create good content. The only way of interacting with the audience and engaging with the audience, and also engaging with potential sponsors or marketing opportunities, is if we have content. If we don't have any content, at some point the audience will look somewhere else, and the audience will not be engaged with us. So it will just be a roller coaster of things shown somewhere, but with no interaction. And what we really want to do is to offer them that opportunity of growing from the beginning, to reach out at some point the maximum level. And this is not only us who is doing this. We can also see that people like the Olympic Channel, which is, so unfortunately, our colleague and friend Mary was not able to attend, but I'm going to explain a little bit what the Olympic Channel is doing also in terms of showcasing the sport and how they interact with not only the athletes and all the actors, but also with the organization. So first thing that they always do is to engage with the International Federation first, to make sure that they are aligned with the sports and with the governance of the sport, and that they cover the events that are ruled by the sports in terms of anti-doping rules, judges, and all the sport technical ecosphere, but also that they know what's going on. Because usually what happens with a broader organization is that they don't know what's going on lower levels. So usually the International Federation reaches out to the national federations for the national federations to feed them with information, events, knowledge about the athletes and how. So it's a really dual relationship, so that we as a national federation can feed an international federation of tips and things that they might be following up. And then the International Federation feeding the mother of everyone, which is the Olympic Channel or the Olympics, in terms, again, of athletes to follow, things to watch, or people to explain the sport and educate the audience, because that's also one of the main roles that we have as international organizations, which is educate the audience. In a sport like figure skating or like triathlon, which is also my sport, it is really important to make sure that the audience understands the sports, the rules, how it works, and this gives an excellent opportunity, and we will see a little bit later how ISU is using that, to open up the content window to more types of content. So you don't only have to, or you don't only can show live events and programs of the sport, but you can also educate the audience on how this is changing and how you can even recognize a jump or a pirouette or something when you watch as a spectator, as someone who has no clue of the sport, but is really willing to see what's going on. So the Olympic Channel created a while ago a theme sections and theme channels for each sport. One of them obviously being figure skating, but they have of every single winter and summer sport. So they have also ice skating, they have ice hockey, they have luge, skeleton, all the curling, all the sports that are run on ice. And they have different types of content for each type of sport, of discipline. And they don't only focus on just live content, as we were saying before, that us on triathlon are doing, but they're also showing on upcoming events and things to know, basically preparing for the Olympics and preparing for what is next, and how will they warm up and make sure that they engage and they educate the audience on the upcoming Beijing Olympics. Things to know, how to watch, and specifically how to watch. When it comes to internet and when it comes to broader and international audiences, this is one of the main issues that we have. And this is when platforms that are specifically video-oriented platforms work really well, which is making sure, when we're talking about live sports, making sure that we differentiate different markets in different countries to make sure that people in Chinese Taipei know exactly at what time they have to connect, so that when you type in figure skating at olympics.org, it shows the time exactly in your time zone. So because with multiple events going on in multiple places with multiple time zones, it definitely can happen that you miss this. And this is one of the main challenges that we have now, all sport organizations, to face. And it's how we can communicate to different audiences when our events go live at one specific time. That doesn't necessarily have to be the time that is, so it's not, obviously it's not the same time in every region. So we have to deal with people that is at 3 a.m. in the morning, people that is watching at 10 p.m., people that is watching at different time zones, and how we can make sure that when we plan events, we also plan them considering what is my main market, what is my main audience, where is my main audience based, and how I can adapt the timings to the different time zones. So that's one. But the main one is also to be educated. And you saw before the video of Nathan Chen explaining how he wants to, or doing an exclusive interview with the Olympic Channel on how he's preparing mentally and preparing physically for events, but also showing the audience how things can evolve and how things can move for the next few years. And also using the library. And the library means, and this is something that at this moment only the Olympic Channel can do, which is use their massive, extensive archive or library. So they do have all the really old, back from the 70s and 60s Olympics records. So for them, it's really easy to just move on and start showing all videos to just keep up and also to show the evolution of the sport. And this is also what the International Federation is doing, what ISU is doing in this case. So they have come up, as we have done also on triathlon, so they have come up with some series of content that is showing, and we saw one episode of Up Again, but they have plenty of other different types of content that are helping the community of not only wait during the off season for the season to start and start building again new content, but also to produce new contents, bring the new faces up, and make sure that the audience starts knowing a little bit. But the main asset that they are also focusing on as an international federation is education. And education is something really important, not only internal for the judges, for the coaches, for even the athletes or the young athletes, to explain how an element works and how you can even do one of those elements, but also to help the non-expert community. I always say the same thing. If I can get my mom to watch an event and know what's going on, then I will get a new fan. If I can get my mom and not give any explanation whatsoever, and it's just an exercise with beautiful music, but with no knowledge of what's going on, it might mean that it's not so flawless or so encouraging to watch, let's say. The other thing they're doing at ISU, and that is really going to set a trend for the next few years, is getting those exclusive interviews, but not only with current athletes. They're really focusing on young kids. And this is where the national federations play a key role, because they should be the ones spotting, and it's really interesting for national federation to have opportunities to, in training camps, in development camps, in development opportunities to identify and spot this kind of like talent identification of athletes that are also not only showing that they will have a long career or they will have a successful career, but also athletes that for whatever reason, they can be on the spotlight, even if it's just for a little bit. And it can be an athlete that is for or from a country that doesn't have the usual background. So in sports like figure skating, most of the well-known athletes or top elite athletes are coming from the same countries as always. So usually spotting or identifying up-and-coming athletes that are from countries or regions that have less tradition in the sport is really good for international organizations like the International Federation or like the Olympic Channel to help grow the audience on those markets. So a really good asset that we in triathlon always do is that we always go to contact national federations in what we call development countries, which the term development, when it comes to sport, doesn't necessarily mean development in terms of financial or economic development. It means development countries because the sport is yet not well developed in those countries. So we usually contact those countries and contact the National Federation and ask them, do you have any athletes that you do think that can be good to help us promote the sport in your region? And also to show that we are growing as a national federation. And this is where I think it comes the role of the national federation to help putting those athletes on the spotlight, giving them a little bit of media attention, just to make sure that we generate some content around them that can be then used outside the region, outside the national federation, on the international level, to make sure that they can have those minutes of exposure on international channel, which can be great always for the National Federation and always for the sponsors of the National Federation, but it can also be really great for the international organizations to show that they're spreading out and that they're trying to cover as many countries or regions as possible. This is always a good thing to showcase. And this is why the educational side of these type of products that can be either an OTT platform or like ISU is doing, using the current tools that are available like YouTube, like Facebook. They're also doing a great effort, and let me see. They're also doing a great effort on doing live. So ISU is basically using, instead of an OTT dedicated platform provided with external providers, they're using current tools that are on the market, social tools, so that it's easier for them to integrate that with their existing social media channels. So they can easily integrate their live streaming on Facebook, obviously on YouTube, on their Instagram channels, Twitter channels, and all their platforms, so that they make sure that first the branding around everything is aligned, and also the whole concept and the whole strategy is aligned. So the comments, the feedback from the users, and they can learn from the community and make sure that they use all that feedback from the users. So there's basically, and as a kind of a wrap up to this whole display of tools and approaches that different international organizations are doing to showcase the sport, is that there is two ways of doing it. And one is doing the tools that are free and already exist on social media to engage and interact and go in digital mainly. And the other one is to create your own dedicated channels and resources on an OTT platform, which requires more investment in terms of financial investment and also human resources investment. But it also shows a level of integration and a level of development of the and gives the commercial opportunities for the sport that is way greater than when you use free tools. But this is what all of us international organizations are doing towards, and basically towards the Olympics, to make sure that we are more than ready, not only for Beijing, which is right around the corner here, but also to prepare for the next Winter Olympics and to make sure that we know how to be ready for the bigger audiences to grow, to have a sport that is robust enough that we can have a pathway, not only for the athletes to the Olympics, but also for the whole community, for the fans, for the sponsors, for the coaches, and for the federation itself to have a presence on top of the pinnacle of the sport, which is the Olympics. And I talk a lot, but I don't know if there's any questions from the audience or anything that you want to ask.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Cernuda, for your presentation. And indeed, digitalization and OTT is really the way to go. And here we have some questions from the audiences. First, the audience said that she appreciates, especially when you mentioned that your grandmother can also understand figure skating because of the digitalization and the OTT and all the filmmaking. And I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about what would you consider the biggest challenge so far in your operation of OTT platform?
It's a really, really good question. And I always ask myself that question before planning content for the digital channels, which is like, will my mom or my grandmom or someone will understand what I'm talking? Because I have a knowledge of the sport, so I don't have to. And this is, I think, one of the main things that we have to understand, that we need to plan the content of the OTT platforms or all the channels, the social channels, not only for the fans and athletes, so the people that is already in. We really want to attract people who doesn't know that much about the sport. That's why we always need to be a little bit educators, and we need to explain the sport to make sure that we add more people. Then they will become fans and educated fans. But at the beginning, we need to be more as open as we can. What I think is the more important thing is two key assets. One is having the possibility of offering live content. And if live content is not events, because events are yet not happening so much because of the pandemic, it can be other events. It can be training. It can be, I was discussing with some friends that are judges, figure skating judges, and they were saying that during the pandemic, they were doing at-home competitions of spins using these little spinning tools that you put on the floor and you can spin at home. And they were just doing spinning competitions between 4 or 5 friends and showcasing them on their OTT platform. So that's generating content, even if it's homemade content, is key. And you can generate live content even if you don't have events going on. So there is other ways of generating content that people is eager to consume. Mm-hmm.
And I have another question. Is that how much content do you think it is needed, and to what kind of degree of the frequency? Like, is it required that to have content 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, something like that, or it doesn't need to be that much?
Yeah, no, 24 hours a week, I think only Netflix and these massive platforms can do, or the Olympic Channel, because they have 40 or I don't know how many sports, like plenty of different sports. For us, I think it's good to offer the opportunity. So everything that you think and produce to be live, then you can have it available to watch on demand because of the time zones that we were saying. So there's people in different time zones. So you might not be able to watch it at 2 a.m. in the morning, but you can rewatch it afterwards whenever it's feasible for you. And that's one of the good things about going digital, that you can go at whatever time you want. In terms of how much content, I'd say is never enough. So as more as you can get, you will always have people watching and using, but you also need to learn a little bit from the audience. So and this comes with time. So by analyzing every piece of content that you upload, you get to know what works better and what doesn't work. So on triathlon, for instance, we came to the conclusion that people was really, really eager to know about para triathlon, for instance, but they were not so much eager to know about I don't want to mention anything so that they don't feel like they don't like them, but there's some other parts that they don't like. So by analyzing what people watches more and what people stay more watching, you can say, okay, so audiences really like this type of content, so I can produce more of this content instead of this other one. Mm-hmm.
So as for local OTT stakeholders like ELTA Sports TV, do you have any suggestions to us?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, for if I have, definitely. I was saying that going local is really, really important. And for us to go down and go to the local level and identify up and coming young athletes. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the best ones. It can be the ones who have a better story to tell. So if you have an athlete that is the first time that an athlete from that city or from that ice rink or that has a particular story for whatever reason, or these type of different stories also always work really, really well in terms of getting people introduced. And those how to recognize jumps or in terms of figure skating, recognize things. These educational videos are always extremely good because most of your audience is not educated. So they know about the sport, but they don't necessarily know a lot about the sport. So in figure skating, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but things like asking music experts on how you choose a music for a program, asking costume designers on how you actually build a costume for an ice skater or figure skater, asking coaches on how you prepare athletes from going from just learning how to skate to just do triple jumps. This type of showing not only just the athletes training and competing, but showing all the things that are around the athlete work really, really well always. Mm-hmm.
And for sure, generating content requires time and requires also money. So how do you think about to charge For the audience about watching the content, what is the balance? What do you think about it?
I think that's the key question, and that's something that each organization is trying to answer by testing. In triathlon, for instance, we have our top tier events that we always go on a subscription model, so it's a pay-per-view event. But all the junior events, the second and third tier events are open to more public. So the behind the scenes, the interviews with athletes are open, and we post them on social media as well. So we keep a balance between what is really expensive to produce, which in our case is the live events because of the TV production that is in sports like figure skating, where the TV production costs are way less than an open air sports. I guess that you can balance a little bit more and not necessarily have to go to a pay model when it comes to even top events, because the costs are less. And also consider that now, as we were saying at the beginning, with the tools, the digital tools that are available, everyone can do an interview. You don't have to bring an athlete to a studio to set up the whole studio. You can do online kind of webinar type of interviews that work really well on television as well. And we've learned that reduces the cost, which allows you to produce more content and to do more things.
So we also have some opportunity because of the pandemic, right?
Exactly. It's bringing new opportunities and new ways of approaching the ecosphere.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cernuda.